Thoughts arise, and are you generating them? So this is a fairly simple exercise meant to interrogate whether there is a subject authoring our thoughts. For me, this exercise is a good way to at least chip away at the intuition that I am absolutely the author of my thoughts. But as you'll notice, this intuition is so ingrained that the perception that we are the thinker of our thoughts will creep back in. Anyways, I thought that this would be a fun exercise to do, exploring thought generation. So let's sit on a couch, get comfortable, put your earbuds in, put down your phone. Let's look out the window at something in nature. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. The point is to just relax and let your attention land wherever it naturally wants to rest. I do feel that this exercise needs an environment that fosters significant concentration with as little distraction as possible. So if you're in a hurry to get somewhere else, it might be best to delay this exercise for another time. Let's spend a few minutes questioning whether our experience supports a stance that we are the author of our thoughts. The initial answer might be, of course I am. Who else is? Thoughts originate in my brain, and I'm fundamentally what's happening in my brain. I completely understand that response. I don't want to diminish that stance, as it's a very important way to navigate life. But this exercise is to inspect experience from the first person. What is recognized as happening right now, in this moment? Let's start with a couple simple questions, and let's see if there's anything interesting to be found. As you sit on the couch, with your gaze resting on an object outside, I want you to think of a musician or musical group. Now I want you to think of a fruit. Now think of a country. Pretty easy exercise, right? I want to rattle off a few questions to sharpen the direction of this exercise. Let's interrogate what just happened. Were the answers or thoughts auditory in nature? Were they visual? Was there an approximate location noticeable in relation to the object out the window? Like, did the thought appear over here, perhaps behind your eyes? When the answers were thought, was there a subject noticed generating the answer, or did the answer just kind of pop up over here and was noticed as it popped up? I know this is a lot, but just like when we tried to notice what hands on a couch really feels like, I want us to interrogate what we actually notice when a thought arises, not just say, I am thinking the thought. When you think back to the responses of the musician, the fruit, the country, is it interesting to you why those answers arose? How many others could have just as easily been the answer, but not chosen? And finally, did you notice any trailing narrative, possibly justifying the answer, like, I was just listening to that musician? Do you get the point of the exercise? Let's do it again. For this round, don't spend any effort trying to figure out where or what is going on right now. Just observe what happens. As you sit on the couch, with your gaze resting on an object outside, I want you to notice a characteristic about the object that you haven't already noticed. And now, think of a vegetable. Name a movie. Name a company. Again, what was your experience when the answers arose? Did it feel like a subject generated the answers, or did the thought and answer kind of pop up and was there to be recognized? Were the thoughts auditory in nature? Visual? Did you notice any other trailing thoughts, like a gist of a narrative explaining why that answer? For me, this is probably one of the easiest exercises to chip away at the intuition that I am as a subject looking out into experience an author of my thoughts. It does take curiosity and a certain amount of concentration to not miss what's actually happening, but I feel like it should be doable for the majority of us. But although this can be confirmed over and over again with direct observation, it's also predictable that the sense that we do author our thoughts will creep back in, that in some way there's a subject next to the thought. That's deeply ingrained. Stated differently, we are as surprised as anyone else would be with what answers just popped up. If you recognized in our previously completed exercise that we are not identical to our thoughts, but instead aware of them, and that when a thought subsides and is gone, we're not gone with it, then adding a curiosity to the mechanics of thought generation makes logical sense to explore. Are you ready for the last round? Let's do this. See if you notice, in addition to the thought arising, any gist of a narrative trailing the thought. This is next level concentration. As you sit on the couch, with your gaze resting on an object outside, think of a sports team. Think of a number between 1 and 10. Think of an actor. Once you start to recognize thoughts arising as information, as opposed to anything you are doing, something else becomes more clear. Narratives are recognized. They aren't clear most of the time, like a distinct description, like, I went to my son's baseball game yesterday and that's why I chose the team I chose. Or, the team I chose is my favorite team. That's not the way I notice it working. But you will begin to notice subtle gists, like a play from your child's game yesterday, or a brief image of a player from a favorite team. It will become interesting that so much narrative can be created without a clear narrative in the literary sense. Now at the beginning, some will have an easier time saying, okay, sure, the answer just popped up. But for some reason, many will find that the trailing narrative is more me. That's fine to take that stance, but if you have the slightest curiosity here and you're open to exploring what is actually occurring, it will become more and more clear to you that the trailing narrative just popped up too. As anyone that has practiced mindfulness knows, thoughts are constantly arriving and passing away. I've sat for hours at a time, and the number of thoughts that arose was astounding. What was even more astounding was how useless most of them were. I guessed that less than 2% of my thoughts per hour of observation were actionable, helpful thoughts. The rest were mediocre at best, and an alarming percentage were completely useless. Think about this. How many thoughts do you think arose yesterday for you? How many do you actually remember? I find this simple inquiry fairly amazing. I don't expect you to understand this realization at this point, but it is possible to recognize thoughts as information in each moment. Nothing more, nothing less. Some information is actionable, but most information is useless, similar to ads and posts arising on your social media account. If you live in New York City and you have a constant sensory inflow of honking each day, would you say that you are a loud individual? Are you a honking person? Of course, the answer would be to say that your identity is not defined by sensory information like honking. Let me ask you this though, are some of the honks more useful information than others? I think we could agree that the answer is yes. If you're walking on a crosswalk and a taxi honks at you, that's an important one to respond to. But most of the honking you recognize as you're on the sidewalk is kind of useless information in the moment. Sam Harris has said that with progression, thoughts will be like thieves entering an empty house. There's nothing to find. It's not that you become empty, and it's not that thoughts stop arising. Short of a lobotomy, or possibly a stroke, you will not be able to stop them from coming and going. That endpoint doesn't even make sense, and be suspicious of anyone that suggests that that's the goal. What is the case, though, is that it's absolutely possible to change our default relationship to thoughts. They hold power over us when we get caught up in the narrative. This is possible when there's an incorrect intuition that we are our thoughts. That relationship allows them to define us in some way. I can attest that if you continue to inspect further, it is possible to get to a recognition that the constant stream of thoughts arising and passing away during each moment of the day can be recognized for what they are: a constant flow of information, usually in the form of a gist narrative. Once you recognize this relationship to thoughts, it's kind of a superpower, as you have the freedom to not get wrapped up in them. You can act on a small percentage of actionable ones and let the majority pass away as quickly as they arose, leaving more time to enjoy the flow of the day. Here's your assignment for the week. As you're getting ready in the morning, brushing your teeth, making coffee, as you're going through the motions with the flow of the morning routine, just see if you can recognize the flow of thoughts arising and passing away. Notice if they create an emotional response, like tightness in the chest. See if you can appreciate that they are like a continuous social media feed. Observe how many are useless and unactionable, and possibly take a moment to write down which ones really need an action to be performed. You'll be surprised how little you write down on a to-do list.